Usability. So usability could be a whole course in and of itself, and in fact, there are schools that they have degrees even dedicated to usability. The rough idea with usability is to make something usable, right? And there are certain things that you want to take into account when considering usability, particularly when you're doing web design or any sort of interactive um, application, even virtually as well as actually just physically, right? So it sounds stupid, but making sure a door is very clear that you need to pull or push is an example of usability. If it's not easily determined by the user that they need to pull or push, then you're sort of failing on the usability front. Hopefully that makes sense. So there are certain things we have to take into account for, let's say, the printed page versus a web page. The only real task that they have as a printed page is just to make sure that everything is legible, right? So that you follow, the visual hierarchy, and you make sure that like alike items are together, that things are chunked so that it's easy for the reader to consume the content, right? Which we also have to worry about as well when we're doing web pages. However, we also have to concern ourselves with them interacting with the web page. So we need to make sure that when they are using it, that it's clear how the navigation works, how to scroll, where if there's any sort of interactive components, how to interact with those components, just because we have one layer more than they do. So there's 5 major considerations with dealing with usability. One is learning. The user can understand the content of the site and grasp the concepts throughout. You want to make sure that they can quickly understand how they're supposed to, that they understand the structure of what you're creating, and that they're able to learn that and basically keep that. That would be the memorable aspect to it. Efficiency. The navigation structure is clear to the user. So this is one of the things I kind of mentioned before. When you create navigation, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. They've already learned a certain way of doing things, and you want them to feel comfortable going there. Have you ever played a video game, particularly like a shooter game is the one I always think of, where they don't use the typical buttons? So, for instance, like in Skyrim, jump is Y, which I understand why you put jump as Y because it's like the top button. But in every other game, it's A, right? If A is not jump, it's very confusing when you go into another game. When I was younger, some of you guys might have it that when you push up, that actually goes down, right? And then when you push down, it goes up. They have an invert, right? When I was younger, there was a bunch of like first-person shooter games that were like that, and then there were other ones that were when you push up, it goes up. And there was no way of changing those. So it's like you go from one game and try to like you get a grasp of it, and then you go another one, and now you got to relearn it, right? And it's like a muscle memory thing. So it's the same idea here. You want to try and make sure that you just try to stick to standards because it's just more efficient. Memorable. Make sure the users left an experience that they remember, so that way when they do come back, they've already used it, and then they've cataloged that information. You also want them to leave with a positive feeling, just from a user experience standpoint. Obviously, errors. There shouldn't be any errors. If they find errors and they're just going around in loops and they can't. People have a very low tolerance for errors, especially now. They won't be willing to stick around. And then obviously satisfaction, which I already kind of left with the memorable. You can click on this, and there's a nice little article about it. You can read that. It'd probably be beneficial, particularly if usability is something that you're concerned with. Those of you that are computer science majors, this should be something that you should care about. It's probably partly why they have you take the web design course. Not so much for the coding aspect, but for the general kind of interfacing with computer graphics and usability through code, which is also useful for others as well. If this is a subject that you're more interested in, kind of like I had mentioned before, at my Digital Imaging 4 class, we go over usability in a bit more depth. But there are books and articles and things dedicated to that more specifically.